Hey Stacy's class, here's part third and final. I've got all of the passes, including one that I didn't show you that I took of slightly different colors, in Photoshop, and I'm just holding shift and dragging them all on top, and that's going to ensure they all line up properly with each other. I'm sorry the resolution of this one isn't as good. I just brought it all onto my tablet because I only just reset my computer and I don't have my preferences set up how I want them to be on Photoshop on my desktop. So I'm looking at all my passes and trying to decide what to do first. And this is where I could really spend forever. Instead, we're going to go by fast. We're going to make something that's kind of mediocre looking. But first, I'm going to open up channels and I'm going to try and take out lighting, but I forgot to flip it, so it's going to be backwards. Basically, when you have one of your passes open, you open up channels, and then you control-click on the RGB, and it's going to get you the channel that corresponds to that path. And then I use that channel, which is just a selection, to create a mask onto a curves layer, and then I use that curves layer to adjust the lighting. It's a really great non-destructive workflow method of adjusting lighting, and I can do the same thing if I invert it and then just make it brighter. So I can adjust the light, I can adjust the dark, I can make sure that the darkest light is never darker than the lightest dark, just like John used to say. I had to pause for a moment. And I can adjust the curves, and then I can also adjust the opacity of the curves layers, which gives me tons of flexibility with this stuff. You can play with this forever and try and make it exactly how you want, but I'm just going to get it okay. Now I'm going to grab my AO, and I'm going to do the same thing. Control-click on the channel, the RGB channel, and create a curves layer from that. First I got to invert it. Except I don't gotta invert it because you don't actually invert that one. Or do you? Oh no, you do. It's just that the AO out of Blender needs a little bit of work. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use another curves layer to actually do a little bit of work on it before I actually turn it into a channel. So I'm going to make another curve up above AO. And I'm just going to up the contrast. I'm going to make sure that all the parts that aren't ambient occlusion are white, and the actual occluded segments are super dark, so that they're going to show up really nicely on my filter. So I'm going to grab that using channels, control-click, and then just dump it into a curves layer. And now I get really... Then I invert it, and then I dump it into a curves layer. It's hard to remember these things. Invert it, dump it into a curves layer, and then I get really nice adjustment on my AO. It's a great way of just making everything pop a little bit more, of differentiating all of your values, making sure that none of your objects are blending together where you don't want. And remember, this is a mask, so you can also always paint on top of the mask if your AO is somewhere where you don't want it to be. I don't do this here, but you can easily do that there. You just go black, you just grab black, you go in, and you paint out anywhere you don't want your AO to be. And then if you want it actually how it was before, you just grab that path again, or you just grab that pass again, and you reapply the original mask. So now I've got like some slightly better lighting. I put a little dot there and mask that out, so it's just a tiny little speck, because now I'm going to use my other pass to get some detailing work done. I wanted like a red line across this wall, so I'm just kind of quickly and clumsily just jotting down a red line by painting into the mask over the other pass. I do this all the time. It's a really great way of, even though it looks like trash here, it's a really great way of getting some detail and getting some variation in your object without having to actually do any of the hard work of figuring out exactly how that color is going to transform, exactly how it's going to be different. Obviously, if I was going to then paint on top of this, I would make sure to paint in the reflected light from that very bright red. But since this isn't about painting, this is just about compositing, I am leaving it exactly how it is, and I'm just going to show you how to use the mask on the extra path. So that looks pretty great, or it looks okay. I could have done a better job here, but again, this is just a quick demo. I'm not trying to make a masterpiece here. I really could spend absolutely forever on this topic. The other stuff, the modeling, the rendering, it's basically just machinery. I accidentally masked in the wrong thing there. Modeling and the rendering, it's basically just machinery. But this is where the artistry really starts, but the machinery doesn't really stop. And that is a really, really special place to be. And I like to stay there as long as possible because it makes things really easy to do quickly. Obviously, you're always going to have to go in there with paint and paint in it, make it yours. But for now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just get something done really fast. Remember, all these tutorials are all in real time, so I'm not trying to I'm not trying to make a masterpiece. I'm just trying to breeze through it, show you how fast this can be. That's the main benefit. It's like you're not going to make the best pieces like this, but you are going to make a lot of them really quickly. I honestly probably spent too much time on that little stripe, considering it's not even in proper perspective for the scene. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make it look good by scuffing it. I'm just going to grab one of my more textural brushes and paint that mask back out. Just kind of jot at it, mess with it, really beat it up. I'm going to beat up the rest more when I grab the ID pass and dump it in here so that I can actually assign different textures to the different materials on this. But for now, I'm just using this brush to scuff out what is obviously like paint. I'm also going to use a little bit of lasso tool. I don't use lasso tool enough in this project. I probably should have done it more. But just to scuff out some of this paint, make it look like it's a little bit more worn. And then I'm also going to paint into white to get some paint spattered where it probably shouldn't be. And again, it's just going to make it that much more, it's just going to give it that much more personality without really doing any proper painting. Again, that comes later. And then you remember there's a little bit more yellow in the pass on the wood, so I'm also painting that in. It's this time, instead of like actual paint, it's just, color variation in something that's organic. No two planks of wood are going to be exactly the same shade, and they're all going to be detailed, and even without bringing texture in yet, I can still give them some personality. And I can use my passes to do this. It's all about knowing what kind of tools are at your disposal, how they can properly be used, what kind of strategies you've got. Then I'm going to grab some specific planks and I'm going to color them all at once in general. If I had been smart, I probably also would have grabbed some and put them on a curves layer and darken them a little bit just to give some tonal variation. But we'll get plenty of tonal variation when I add the textures. Trying to be as random as possible, trying to just grab anything that I really feel like and and just going to town on it. You don't always have to paint in pure black or pure white when you're painting in a mask. You can use shades of gray. You can color pick, and when you're painting in a mask, color picking will just give you whatever shade of gray that mask is right there. So it's really a nice way of getting your... It's really a nice way of getting your stuff done fast by just using doing the same painting stuff we've been doing for years now, color picking and painting in, color picking and painting out, except this time you're doing it on a mask instead of on a proper painting. I have way too many brushes right now. I just downloaded a new brush pack and I still need to cull it out, so I'm trying to look for one that's going to give me a little bit more personality. Never you just use one brush. Or, I mean, you could, especially like if you're using the hard round brush, if we are one of those hard round brush purists. But if you're doing texture, don't use one brush to texture everything, because not everything is the same texture. I'm going to use almost all one brush for this, but that's because this is a small project and I'm lazy. And also because it's a really good brush. It's Robin Haar's brush pack that I just downloaded. It's absolutely massive. Yeah, just trying to get a little bit more splatter in there. If I remember correctly, I took too long on this. I tried some stuff that wasn't going to work. I am constantly experimenting with what I can get away with just like shapes and masks and textured brushes and stuff, just trying to figure out what will actually end up looking good and what just doesn't work. Anything to make my life easier so that I can get more paintings out and so that they'll be better and so that I don't burn out. Because that's the thing, is it's hard to paint really well for a long time. Like, I love painting really well, but I can't do it for more than 6 hours. And if I was going to paint this from scratch, that's what it would take. But it's barely going to take an hour when all things are said and done, because I'm using all these strategies. Finally got something that kind of works. I'm just brushing it in there. It's a little bit less though. I'm getting some texture down there so that it can come out of the thing. And here we go. Here I'm gonna grab the clown pass and I'm gonna use this to grab the specific pieces of the model and texture them individually. I'm going to do this by applying it to a folder and then putting all of my painting in that folder. I've already pre-downloaded a couple of really nice high quality textures, but the quality isn't actually going to matter. You're never going to actually be able to tell what quality they were once I'm done with them, because they will be mangled beyond recognition. Just double selecting everything, making sure I got everything. It's not the most efficient way to do it, but it's the way that I did it this time. Sometimes I use more precise methods, like actually grabbing individual RGB channels, but that wasn't working this time, so that's what we're gonna do. I'm going to go into the wood first, and I've got this wood texture. It's dark, it's really high res. You can see it totally covers it. I'm actually going to scale it down, do some scaling with it. It's dark, it's really high res, and it's very desaturated, so it's not going to put a whole lot of influence into that color that I chose for my wood. I'm just going to duplicate it, move it around, merge it down, duplicate it again. You'll see me doing this more when I do the metal texture. Yeah, and like rotate it. Make sure that none of your details are repeating. Make sure that it doesn't look like you've just tossed in some some textures, just like tossed in some images. I doubt any of you will do that. You're all much smarter than that. And then I'm going to bring the opacity down, and I'm going to change the layer type to, yeah, hard light really works for this one. I never know what the layer type is going to do before I click it. I always just like play around with them, play around with the opacity, play around with the layer type, figure out which one's going to work the best. And then just like I did with those passes, I'm not just letting this sit there, I'm painting in on top of the mask, and making sure that it's not just, it's not just a texture that I put off the internet that I'm gonna just slap over my painting without any regard for how it's actually gonna look in the end. You can see that big seam right there. I'm gonna make sure that that's gone by the time I'm done with this wood. And that's starting to look really nice. That's starting to look like wood, kind of textured, kind of painted. It's not super photo. It's not really a photo. If you wanted to make it even less of a photo, you could try putting a filter over it. I didn't do that this time, but I do that a lot. Grabbing some weird ass brushes and kind of painting them in. Kind of looks like I honestly don't know what the hell that is. It's fine. But yeah, it's starting to look really nice. It's not quite enough variation for my taste, but I'm going to fix that later. Go back to my old standard. And then combined with that randomization that Blender let me put in, it really starts to look like something I put a lot of time into, even though I barely touched it. You're serving kind of an illusion, really. You're you're trying to convince people that you cared a lot more about it than it looks like you did. You cared a lot more. It looks like you cared a lot more about it than you actually did. Excuse me. Now, no one in the industry, no art director, or no one who's has any experience will be fooled by that. But the layman certainly will be, and we're in this business for production. We're here to make stuff so that it can be used to produce things that the average person will want to consume. And so knowing how to make stuff look good and knowing how to make stuff look good easily and with barely any effort is really, really helpful. I probably spent too long on this, honestly. I started overworking it a little bit. I should have just let it go. Because this is about the stage where you leave it alone and then you come back to it with a really small brush when you're ready to really make sure that the detail pops in there, that that all of the different all the personality you want is in there. You'd add like notches in the wood or nails or twisted wire and stuff, but that's for another tutorial. I've got this giant piece of like scraped up rusty metal, but it's way too the texture in it is way too big for this wall, which is going to be well over human sized. So I'm scaling it way down and I'm duplicating it a bunch. I'm rotating, I'm merging, I'm duplicating, I'm rotating some more, and I just keep on doing that. And this is again in service to randomization, in service to making sure that nothing ever stays the same, nothing ever looks the same as its neighbor. Yeah, just duplicating, rotating it around, throwing it everywhere, trying to grab stuff, but I accidentally have the polygon lasso tool selected, so it does that. Grab this thing, put it over there. Can't grab that thing. Accidentally grab the whole thing. Go with it, and just, this doesn't really matter. You're just putting textures on stuff. And most of it's going to disappear behind the mask, which you know is coming. merge it all, and then test it with the layer types. At 50% opacity with overlay, it was like perfect for this one. It usually never comes that fast. Like, it usually never works that well. But you know, overlay I find myself using the most often. And then mask it all out. I didn't do this with the wood, but I did this. I'm doing this here. Mask it all out and then paint it back in, because that texture is so overpowering that you really want to be pretty lenient with it, pretty conservative. Even though I'm putting way too much, I'm going to come back in here and take it out again. I'm already starting to take it out. Not pressing with my brush very hard, just kind of almost airbrushing it in. And there's a lot more artistry that I could have put into this too. I'm just kind of like blasting it everywhere. It's a little bit too regular. As it is, it's going to turn out a little bit too regular for my tastes. Again, I'm sharing that the final composite and just a bit of the painting on the Calypso that I did from the last render tutorial. And that is really some of the better texturing work that I've done. I made sure that that's going in my portfolio that I'm going to show to ILM soon, if they want to see it. If they choose me to as one of the people to interview, I hope they do. But the BFA people probably get priority. Now, last thing, I'm just going in there with a bit of white and just adding a little bit of highlight. This is where you kind of cross the border into painting. Trying to keep in mind the light source, but not that hard. I'm not trying that hard. But yeah, this is about the last thing to start doing before you really start painting, before you really start going in there to the small detail, to the personality stuff that you want to add that's not just general. But it's kind of like it's like how Inga talks about you want to bring the whole painting up together. All of these methods, it's a great way to bring the whole painting up together. And then by the time you're going into detail, you've got a hell of a lot to work with. I spotted a hard edge there, so I'm just taking care of that. That's gonna about wrap it up. It's okay. Oh, here it goes. It starts over again. It's okay. I'll share with you my Photoshop file. I barely really did much, but that's all for this tutorial. I hope it helps you on the time machine. It's a great way to get started working, but also, word of warning, don't let it be the only way that you paint. I came dangerously close to that pretty recently. I had a hard time getting back into just pure painting because I've been so focused on these methods. So there's a balance to be struck between industry bullshit and real painting. That'll be it, though. Thanks for listening, and thank you to Stacy especially for letting me do this. I really hope that it helps, and I might end up making some more of this in the future. Bye.